This is Still Enrolled.
And welcome on into the latest edition, a national championship preview edition of Still Enrolled, a Big Ten football podcast. As always, Ryan Hickey and Brian Tripp with you here. Tripp, this is it's exciting because the national title game is here, right? A big game, Ohio State-Notre Dame. It's also a little sad because we started this pod right when the 2024 season started, and while the pod's not stopping going anywhere, it does feel a little sad. It's like the first season, you always remember your first, is now in the books. Very excited for this game. Brad Crawford of CBS Sports will join us here in a little bit as well to preview the game and also break down his too early top 25 list that has 7 Big Ten teams ranked in the top 25 for 2025. We'll get into that, give you our game pick as well. Are you feeling nostalgic here, Tripp? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I'm like, man, this is it. And then the first season of Still Enrolled is in the books.
It's funny because we were talking, I remember in the beginning of December, how much football there still was to be played. And ultimately, the Big Ten was a big part of that. And I don't think it's any surprise, right, that there's a Big Ten team in the national championship here in the 2024 season playing in Atlanta, Ohio State versus Notre Dame. You had 4 teams in the national semifinals that did not have buys, right? They had to play as the maximum amount of games possible. Well, I guess these 2 teams didn't play in a conference championship game. But in this new era of the college football playoff, the expanded playoff, we've learned so much. We've had so much to talk about as the season went on. But I don't think as you get to the end of the year, man, it is tough. I'm not surprised that Ohio State is there. I'm surprised about how they got there. I did not expect Notre Dame to be there at the end of the day. And they are one of the teams, Penn State, certainly in that conversation, then the likes of a Boise and an Arizona State and an Indiana. Yeah, they may not have had a deep run in the playoffs, but the playoffs gave teams like that an opportunity for an overwhelming success of this new model. Notre Dame clearly benefits from the expanded playoff as well, right? They would have been ranked 5th. They would have been on the outside looking in a 14 playoff. Ohio State would have been on the outside looking in. I think we have an awesome national championship game. Marcus Freeman going against the school where he played, the Ryan Day, Lou Holtz narrative that you can build. Ohio State in this NIL era, retaining its roster, which is a conversation we had so much about roster retention the last couple of podcasts that we've done. Ohio State building for this national championship or bust season. Didn't go how it was supposed to, but here ultimately they are at the end of the day. And can Notre Dame win its first national championship since the 1980s? Ohio State, can they overcome the regular season hiccups against Oregon and Michigan? I think it honestly is a great matchup with so many storylines that I can't wait to break down on this podcast.
Same. We're going to give you a big time breakdown here in a second, but one of the storylines you're mentioning, right, is quarterback play.
Yep.
And it's Riley Leonard, it's Will Howard, both transfer quarterbacks. First time we've seen first-year transfer quarterbacks in this new era lead teams to the national title game in year number 1. And Tripp, before we get into the actual breakdown, you want to talk about transfer portal, maybe a solution? Because while Ohio State and Notre Dame are playing, every other team in college football is worrying about their roster retention, worrying about the transfer portal, worrying about everything else for 2025. Is it a solution? What do we have here in terms of the transfer portal that you want to bring to our attention?
Yeah, this is a conversation I had with someone recently, and we really dove into the topic about, and I think we had this conversation mid-December when the biggest story was Penn State's backup quarterback, Bo Pribula, was going to transfer to Missouri and not be a part of the conversation of Penn State participating in the playoff. So for the SMU game on, for Penn State's playoff run, which ultimately went all the way to the doorstep of the national championship, one of their key players, their backup quarterback, was forced to make a decision of, well, can I keep playing? When do I enter the portal? Do I have to leave the program? But to get your opportunity to be a starting quarterback with realistically hoping just 1 year left of college football, you had to make that decision to get enrolled in the spring to play in spring ball at your new institution. And a lot of other players, maybe not in the predicament that Prabula was because their seasons had already concluded. But for playoff teams, your portal window opens for 5 days after the conclusion of your final game. And the portal window closing on December 28th for everyone else, and then not reopening until April. Like there's another portal window coming up then. So we talked about, well, how do you align it with an academic calendar? How do you align this for these? Like, can you create a waiver? And ultimately, the best solution after talking through this with a bunch of people is to eliminate spring ball. You eliminate spring ball. You go to an NFL like off-season model where players can stay at their current school. And this eliminates the chaos of December of putting a bow on a recruiting class, preparing for championship games, preparing for bowl games, and preparing for playoff games, and dealing with the portal, and having your GMs figure out their finances because GMs are a real part of college football now. Then you use the spring. Okay, they go through winter workouts. They go through strength and conditioning with their current school, even if they have the intention of leaving, or maybe they don't. And maybe they go through it on their own. Maybe they go through it at a new school. But you eliminate spring ball, which eliminates the urgency of not only portal players to enroll at a new school by January, also eliminates the urgency of having half of your incoming recruiting class needing to get on campus and measuring the dynamics of getting them on campus. Look, there's benefits, right? They can practice in these bowl practices now. They can practice in these playoff practices with these teams. But the urgency of getting your incoming prospects in January allows them to finish their high school or almost finish their high school career. And you create an NFL-like offseason that features OTAs and a training camp, which then replaces spring ball, which replaces the window of, oh, this player has to get on campus to acclimate with his new system, to participate in spring ball, or else he's not going to have the opportunity to earn a starting spot because he's going to be so far behind, particularly at key positions like a quarterback position. So you eliminate spring ball. And look, yes, there's certain schools, your Alabamas, Ohio States, Penn States of the world, that are drawing 50, 60, 70,000 to their spring ball games. SEC schools, major Big Ten schools, some ACC programs. But ultimately, those games have become, they're not a scrimmage against another team. They're not a scrimmage against their own team. They're glorified practices where it features some sort of entertainment value for the fan. You're not going to show anything because you're not going to show what you actually want to on film because everyone's watching them. They're all televised now. Everyone has access to the footage of it. Eliminate spring ball and go to an NFL-like offseason OTA model that begins in May, carries through June, and then a training camp or a longer preseason camp. And that fixes this portal problem. That fixes this portal problem with the academic, everything we discussed. That is the solution. It extends your calendar further, but it's already a calendar that's 365, 24/7. It already is, whether you want to admit it or not. Like coaches are around, players are around. Yeah, there's these time limits and workout limits. Just, you know what? Just say, forget, oh, you can only be with the strength coach then. You can only be with the analysts then. Just throw those rules out and just go to an NFL model. College football has become a business. Go to that model, and that's the solution to navigate through many, not all, but many, because some schools do trimester, but many of your academic alignment issues and the calendar issues that the current portal model presents.
I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm asking it without an answer of my own. But you are right. You help cover Penn State. You're the sideline reporter, so you know what it's like to be around a program. You're in close, in tie with Penn State. How important, or maybe the better question is, how impactful is actually spring practice? 15 practices in March and April for most programs. Like, does it actually translate to the regular season, in your opinion?
Yeah, because it's when you lay your foundation, you do a lot of your plays, your schemes. If you're a quarterback, and look, this is mainly quarterbacks. If you're a quarterback, if you miss spring practice, you probably don't have the chance. Like the Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, special players. But man, that would really put those. Look how Oregon started the year. Look how Ohio State started the year. Look how Notre Dame started the year. If you miss spring practice with an injury or camp with an injury, or you're not there, it puts you so far behind. Yeah. The 15 practices, the bowl practices at the end of the year and the 15 practices are necessary. So how do you move them and put them in a spot where it still makes sense and allows the portal and you don't have that? The answer is yeah. They're critical. They really are.
So your plan is not getting rid of them, just moving them from basically
you're
middle of
the
OTAs. Semester to
you move to May and June. The kids are all, the athletes are all on campus anyway. They're here training and lifting. So just have a workout program, change your portal timeline, and then you don't have the panic. Go, what do we do? What do we do? And yeah, there's some coaches. It could lead to awkward, disgruntled situations, like if they're here in the spring and they choose to stay for the spring. Are they in your weight room when you know they're going to transfer? You're probably saying no, get out of here. I'm not saying it alleviates every issue, but the Prabula situation, which is a situation that I think brought this to the forefront with the calendar overlap, the portal, and when the portal opens and closes for teams still participating in their active season and playing for a championship. This to me is a real logical solution for it.
Look, I'm sure maybe I'm missing something. It sounds good to me. I think
there's got to be something we're missing. It can't be that easy.
Right. I was going to say, I think also part of the issue is just the fact that there's no right now unified vision. Mm-hmm. So everyone has a million different opinions. Right. And they all just go into an echo chamber and kind of get jumbled up and no actual decision is made and no progress is made. All right. Maybe Commissioner Tripp one day will graduate from the Still Enrolled podcast and ascend to college football commissioner one day. If that's the case, Tripp, don't forget about us. All right. That's all I ask. As we get set here for Notre Dame, Ohio State in the national title game, Tripp, at least for me, the matchup I'm most excited for, that I'm fascinated to see how it goes and it can have a big impact in, I don't know about the outcome, but maybe how close this game is strength on strength, is Ohio State's passing attack versus Notre Dame's pass defense. We saw in the Orange Bowl, Notre Dame's secondary held Penn State receivers without a catch for the entire game. Hot take for you. That's not going to happen against the Ohio State's receivers of Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Buka, Carnell Tate, etc. But if you're Al Golden, Tripp, is Notre Dame? Let me ask you this. You got an up close and personal view of Notre Dame's defense. Are they good enough, in your opinion, as they run the most man coverage in college football, to just line up and say, we're going to take these guys and we're going to win most matchups? Can Notre Dame, man for man, match up with the best receiver room in college football?
I'll answer that question, but I'm not surprised you start with Ohio State's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. Meanwhile, I'm just going to say it again. The strength of Ohio State's team is their defense. Is Notre Dame going to be able to score enough points in this game? Are they going to be able to score enough? Ohio State's offense may not need to have an incredibly efficient and effective game. As you told us earlier this week, they only scored 21 points against Texas. 7 of those points at the end of the game came from their defense, from Jack Sawyer. So while, yes, I'm going to answer that question, can I just emphasize again, the strength of Ohio State's team is their defense. Their offense gets a lot of attention, and rightfully so. It is incredibly talented. And their offense, here's my answer to your question. I think those guys will make some plays. The difference in this game will be, can Ohio State and Will Howard, not so much the matchup on the outside, can they play mistake-free football? Because the only way Notre Dame wins this game is by creating turnovers. And in the Orange Bowl, they had 2 turnovers negated because of penalties. Whether you like the calls or not, they happened. And they had an interception at the end of the game that won them the game. They don't have to completely nullify Ohio State's passing game, but their ends, Young, Oben, that defensive front has to get pressure on Howard enough to make him uncomfortable. And they don't have to shut them down, They have to make enough plays where, going into that Orange Bowl, they had 31 takeaways on the year. They had 148 points off of those takeaways. For them to beat Ohio State, they have to create turnovers. And Will Howard, in the first 2 months of the season, continued a trend that he had at Kansas State. And that was he was susceptible to turning the football over. Will Howard has managed the ball better the later half of the season. I don't want to give my pick away. But the key here isn't can they shut them down? It's can that defensive front do something that really no defensive front has done against Ohio State here in the college football playoff so far. Can that defensive front get pressure on Howard? And are the corners good enough in man coverage? And I think they are. I think they can. Plus Golden's scheme, he's going to kind of go he'd probably do like an umbrella with the safeties, or they bracket with, what do they do with the safety? Their safeties are good. Watts is their best player on defense, the safety.
Yeah.
Can they do enough with their scheme and their corners to slow them down and create a big play? I know it doesn't directly answer your question, but that's how I feel about the OSU offense, pass offense versus the Notre Dame pass defense equation in this game.
I think what's so tough for Notre Dame and why I think at least Ohio State's passing offense will have success is just because there's too many guys to stop. Like we saw Texas. They did the best job in stopping Jeremiah Smith any team has done this year. 1 catch for 3 yards. He was a non-factor. And yet, okay, what happens? Cardinal Tate, another big-time recruit, steps up with a career game and plays well. Emeka Egbuka was pretty sound. So you look at the job Texas did, one of the best pass defenses in all the country. They did a good job at really limiting, for the most part, 2 of the best receivers in all of college football. But yeah, you look up at the end of the game, and Will Howard said, what was it, 240 passing yards? 289 passing yards and a touchdown. Like, he still carved them up and still threw the ball really well. And that's, for how good Notre Dame's defense is, that's so tough.
75 of those yards came on one pass, a screen pass to Travion Henderson. Where was Notre Dame susceptible in the Orange Bowl? Screen passes. And Aller had Singleton on a wheel route down the right sideline that he missed. I think Henderson's a big factor in this game, in the passing game. Henderson and Judkins. I think that's a matchup that really could benefit Ohio State.
I like that. I like that a lot, because I do think that Ohio State's going to struggle to run the ball. They didn't have a lot of success against Texas. They ran the ball well, and it was a complimentary run game, right, against both Tennessee and Oregon. They threw the ball, opened up the run game. I think they're going to have a tough time running on Notre Dame's front. But like kind of what we saw with the Patriots for a while, right? Like they never had a great run game, but what do? The extension of the run game is what you hear. Those, like you said, the underneath, the screens, the dump offs. I like that analysis, by I think that's a great observation. And if we're sitting here talking about Travion Henderson with another big-time touchdown pass, give yourself, Tripp, nice pat on the back.
The other side of the football in this matchup, my big matchup is that Ohio State run defense, and really their defensive front seven's been so good. I think it's taken its game to another level here in this playoff. Simon, the linebacker, and then the 4 defensive linemen that we've talked about ad nauseum the last couple of podcasts. Sawyer, JTT, Hamilton, and Williams on that defensive front. Ohio State's defense, but specifically in this game, it's run defense against Notre Dame's run offense is the other big matchup to really simplify how this plays out. It's an Ohio State run defense that allowed, granted, Oregon playing from behind, allowed 23 yards against Oregon and 58 yards, and those aren't sack adjusted, 58 yards against Texas. They've only allowed more than 125 yards 3 times all season, the Ohio State run defense. The blip, Michigan's 172. Notre Dame, it's like really simple to say, but Notre Dame's kind of got that Michigan big physical push along that line. How do you see Ohio State's run defense matching up against Notre Dame's run offense in a run-heavy offense that needs production from Riley Leonard, new facet for Ohio State to contain there, and then Jeremiah Love, who appears that he's going to be back closest, if not at 100%, closest that he's been in a long time, because not only was he injured, he's dealing with that flu bug in that Indiana game.
You're right. I think Ohio State dominates this matchup. I think they eat it alive for a few reasons. Number one, we saw Penn State hold Notre Dame to 2.8 yards per rush in the Orange Bowl. This is no disrespect to Penn State. I think Ohio State's front four is better than what Penn State has. So I think they'll even be able to have more success. Number one. Number two, they are one of the best rush defenses in the country. But also, too, you look at Notre Dame's offensive line. And the thing that maybe is not getting enough traction coming out of the game because Notre Dame won is their injuries on the offensive line. Yeah. They lost their left tackle, Knapp, who's already been ruled out for this game. And their right guard, Spindler, left the game and did not come back. And his status right now is unknown. So we could be looking at a Notre Dame offensive line missing 2 of their 5 offensive linemen going against right now this defensive line that has taken their game to a totally different level, that is playing maybe the best defensive line in the country. You tell me, Tripp, is there a path right now for Notre Dame to run the ball successfully? Can they have more? I don't see how they have more success even than they did in the Penn State game. Can you see it?
You know, it's funny because they've overcome these injuries all year. And I think if Spindler plays, it gives them a couple of options at left tackle, whether they go with Baker or then they could bring Charles Jagusa out there to tackle. Did I get that right?
I'll be honest, no idea. No, he got hurt in the preseason. I saw that was a big injury for Notre Dame. And I put that name. I saw it and I said, all right, don't have to worry about this all season long. I give it, you know what? A+ for trying. I wouldn't have tried it. I didn't try it.
I mean, if I was truly a professional, I'd pull out my pronunciation guide that I still have in my backpack from the Orange Bowl. But it at least gives them options if Spindler plays. Now, you know what? If there's one team that's overcome injuries as well as anyone all year long, it's Notre Dame. And those guys played well. They played well after the injuries in the Orange Bowl. The third quarter is where Notre Dame took control of the game, then got pushed back, and then they won it at the end too. It's hard to say. It's easy to point to and go, yep, that clearly gives Ohio State the advantage. But that line held up against Abdul Carter and his right arm and denied Dennis Sutton enough where they're able to get a push and wear Penn State down a little bit later in that game. So, yes, I want to say Ohio State has a clear advantage with the level they're playing at right now on the defensive line and front seven. But I think that's what Notre Dame wants me to say.
Which offensive line do you trust more? Because I feel like we always, when you look at Ohio State, right, the big weakness we always talk about all season long, I think going to this game has been their offensive line. Yet, despite the fact they have 3 guys playing out of position / hurt, I trust their offensive line more in this game, in part because at least the injuries they have and guys like Jackson playing out of position, they've done it for longer where we could be talking about 2 new guys on an offensive line that have played for a few quarters in the Orange Bowl, and that's it.
I think Ohio State has the personnel on offense to mask its deficiencies or injuries better than Notre Dame does. I actually trust Notre Dame's offensive line more. I still think style of play, identity, I actually trust their line more, that they were able to hold up against a really, really good Penn State defensive front seven, that defensive line. I trust Notre Dame personnel more, even though Ohio State's played so well. But I think Ohio State has the ability to mask it more. If those injuries are a factor for Notre Dame, I don't think they can overcome it. If injuries are a factor for Ohio State, I think they can overcome it.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Let me ask you this then. When it comes to we talked about a lot in the early this week's pod, Tuesday's pod, about what it looks like for Notre Dame to kind of play this game on their terms. And we even going back to the Orange Bowl preview we talked about, right, Notre Dame has to get out early and get a lead because we don't think they can come from behind. Which team, if the other team, Ohio State or Notre Dame, is able to kind of dictate the pace here and dictate the kind of the game, do you see a team more equipped to kind of get it back? Because we've talked about Notre Dame winning despite the fact that Penn State played it on their terms and played well for 3 quarters with the injuries. Everything went Penn State's way. Still, we're talking about a Notre Dame win here. If Ohio State gets, let's say, going early and the game's played on their terms, can Notre Dame overcome that the way they did against Penn State? Or do you think it's imperative, and if they don't, they have no shot? If Notre Dame comes out of the gate slow, they're cooked.
Again, I think Notre Dame wants me to say they're cooked. Yeah, I think they were playing with fire against Penn State. I really do. I think Ohio State would be able to close them out with their defense, how their defense has played all year. I keep going back to that Ohio State defense. I think if they played the same way they did against Penn State, and this isn't like a Penn State collapse. I think Notre Dame earned their way back in the football game. But I can't see them doing it again.
I would agree. I don't think it's replicable for Notre Dame. I think, again, if Ohio State gets out to an early lead in this game, kind of looks like for the first 28 minutes.
I still think Penn State played well. I don't think it was Penn State just made all these mistakes. Penn State didn't play well. That's how Notre Dame got back in it. I think Notre Dame played really, really. As we talked about after the games Saturday morning on our pod, the backup quarterback Ignelli coming in and taking them down for 3 points with the little dink and dunk offense, they played well to do that. Then they established, they ran the ball the way they wanted to start the second half. Their receivers made contested catches on 3rd and longs on great throws by Riley Leonard. He threw the ball really well. It's not there were a couple times where Penn State was in coverage or had pressure and Notre Dame made plays. So they proved that they can do it. I don't know that they're good enough to do it again against Ohio State and against that defense. They proved that they could do it. I just don't trust them enough because of their entire body of work to do it again. Again, that's what they want me to say because they kind of thrive on that. But if I was a betting man, I'd say, okay, you did it once. I'm not saying it was the luck of the Irish, but can you do it again? I don't know.
We'll get to Brad Crawford here in a little bit. Part of the reason why I'm in agreement with you where I don't think Notre Dame can fight out of the hole against Ohio State the way they were able to against Penn State is I do trust implicitly here Will Howard. I think he's a big game quarterback. I think he makes good decisions. I think he can help put I think he can help put Notre Dame away, I should say. And I was fascinated. I don't know if you saw this. Saw this on social media. And Malik Zaire is a former Notre Dame quarterback. So he's obviously coming at this with a slanted perspective. Mm-hmm. But he tweeted this week, and I was surprised. He said, all the great QBs Ohio State has had the last 15 years, and Howard is definitely the worst one by far. And Ohio State fans trying to convince me that he's going to lead them to the chip. LMAO, laugh my ass off. Okay. I'd even take OG Jalen Marshall at QB before Howard. Maybe I'm missing something, Tripp, here. I came into the year doubting Will Howard, did not think he was an upgrade over Kyle McCord, and he's proved me wrong. Really, the second half of the season, I have no doubts about Will Howard's ability to play well in this championship game and elevate Ohio State. I mean, I would say he's right from just a pure talent perspective. There are plenty of other quarterbacks I would take over Will Howard. But I think part of the reason why that those other quarterbacks, despite their, increased talent, have been able to get Ohio State over the hump, I think is partly because I think Will Howard has some intangibles, including leadership, that has maybe been missing at times. Like, I don't know. Do you have any doubts going to this game about Will Howard? Riley Leonard, we know, is a dog and plays well. Does Ohio State have the quarterback advantage in this game?
I think there's a lot of intangibles that carry over between both of them. I think Will Howard's the perfect fit for what Ohio State wants them to do. Like, yeah, sure, everyone would love a CJ Stroud or a Justin Fields every year, but this guy's special. He's unique. Look at the way that he was talking to Sawyer, the conversation they had on camera on ESPN after the game. And while they've fallen short in a few big moments this year, when push comes to shove in the biggest moments, Will Howard has been at his best. And I trust, if I'm Ohio State, their fans, their offense, I trust the guy. I think he's been undervalued all year. I think a lot of the credit for their offense has gone to Day and Kelly, and all the criticism has gone to Day and Kelly and their running backs and their receivers. But with that offensive line and those playmakers, someone's got to be the point guard. And he's gotten them to the national championship game. And they chose to move on from Kyle McCord, who had one of the best seasons of any quarterback in college football this year. But this guy's got something unique and special, and he feels like a championship-worthy. He's got championship-worthy intangibles. And I trust the guy. And I've been on the Will Howard, ever since the Penn State game, I've been on the Will Howard Express. Because look at the run again. When they needed a play on 4th and 2 against Texas, whose hands did they put the ball into? And it was Will Howard.
Who should have taken that for a touchdown, if not for the old turf monster there, would have run to glory.
It's so funny. When he went down, I was watching it with a friend. My friend goes, "What happened?" I'm like, "Oh, the turf monster got him." And my friend's like, "I haven't," and I'm like, "You haven't heard of that before?" My friend, "I've never heard of that before." Literally a second later, Chris Fowler, "Oh, he's tripped up by the old turf monster." And then Kirk Herbstreit called it the turf monster. Like, who hasn't heard of the turf monster?
You're hanging out with the wrong people, I guess. That's on your friend. That's not on you. I'm with you there. Sheesh. It's like Daniel Jones all over again from a few years ago in Philly.
So what, like, we can go through every, I think, matchup here. We're going to get into it deeper with Brad. In your opinion, what matchup ultimately decides? We touched on two of the biggest, but what ultimately decides the game?
I think what decides this game, I'm just going to go back to the strength on strength, honestly, because I think if you're Notre Dame, the first thing you have to do to have a chance in this game is slow down the passing attack. And I think if you're Ohio State and Chip Kelly, they've been at their best throwing first. I don't think either team is going to change what they do, right? Notre Dame's not all of a sudden going to stop playing man coverage because they're playing Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State is going to now all of a sudden say, oh, we can't throw the ball against this Notre Dame defense. We're going to have to change what we do. It's going to be a strength on strength. And I think it is just keeping the ball safe because I don't think Notre Dame is good enough for an entire 60-minute game to slow down or shut down this Ohio State passing attack. They're going to get theirs. And I think it's harder for Notre Dame to score points than it will be for Ohio State. So as long as Will Howard's not making mistakes, I think these receivers are going to win, whether it's Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Emeka Buka. To me, doesn't matter. Trayvon Henderson, like the success, there's not one player I think that needs to have a big game for Ohio State in the passing game. It's just that the passing game is rolling. That's to me where this game comes down to. That's where I'm watching. That's where I think Ohio State has the ultimate advantage in a strength-on-strength matchup. That's, for me, I think Will Howard throws his way to a championship. That's, to me, if Notre Dame has any chance of winning this game, they have to hold them under 200 yards passing. I think they got to really try their best to shut down this passing attack and make Ohio State try to beat them on the ground because I don't think they can.
I think Notre Dame, as they did against Penn State, has to prevent the explosive plays. It will shorten the game. It will keep them in it. It will allow Notre Dame more opportunities to create turnovers. If Ohio State can get one or two explosive plays and get some of those home run touchdowns that they got in the Rose Bowl especially, or the Henderson play before half that I think flipped the Texas game kind of, I don't think Notre Dame can overcome that. Now, if Ohio State has to drive the entire field, I'm still not sure that's enough for Notre Dame to win the game, but it gives them a chance. If they can prevent the explosive plays and then create a turnover or two, we got a game. We got a game. Those two areas, turnover margin and explosive plays, have to go Notre Dame's way. That's the two most important factors in the football game.
Be a lot of fun to see. We'll break down with Brad here in a second. We'll also give you our game picks as well. But it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun, Tripp. So let's not wait any longer. Let's get you Brad Crawford, CBS Sports, give you his analysis of the national title game. And we'll go back into the pod as promised. CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, college football analyst Brad Crawford does join us here on the Still Enrolled pod. Brad, thanks so much for giving us the time, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm glad the season is almost over. We're one game away from officially entering the off season, but spring practice starts in like 6 weeks, so there is no off season.
What off season? Exactly. You know it. College football never does sleep. Like you said, we're one game away from the season ending here. Obviously, a big one. Ohio State taking on Notre Dame. I'm curious because I don't think I saw your prediction online of you predicted before the season Ohio State winning the national title. And I don't think you were alone, by that. A lot of people picked Ohio State to win the national title. After obviously the Michigan game and that loss, I think a lot of people changed their tune, jumped off the bandwagon. What have you seen that's led to Ohio State's turnaround from that low point in Michigan to where now, they've been really beating the brakes off of everyone in this playoff and are 1-1 away from the national title. What do you think has been the biggest turnaround for Ohio State in this playoff run?
I tell you what, man, whatever Ryan Day told that team after that loss to Michigan, he needs to bottle it up and sell it to every head coach ahead of the 2025 season because this has just been a light years better Ohio State team. This is the $22.5 million roster that we thought it would be, several months ago. They are clicking on all cylinders. Will Howard is playing lights out. And I think the biggest change for me is the front seven defensively is just, obliterating the competition. They manhandled the Texas front, got after Quinn Ewers. Jack Sawyer won the game late there in the fourth quarter with that strip sack and fumble return. But besides the offensive playmakers and Quinshon Judkins obviously being a great acquisition in the portal, it's been Will Howard for me and the play of that defensive front. I mean, Jim Knowles right now can't ask for anything more than he's being provided by those guys in the trenches.
Texas obviously had an opportunity late in that game, but Ohio State, as they've done so many times this season, comes up with the goal line stand, not only doing that, but then the scoop and score by Sawyer to put the game away. Throughout the course of the 15, 16, 17 game season, whatever it is now, like Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan certainly have shown some vulnerabilities that Ohio State has. Do those still exist, or is this just a different Ohio State team and you can only judge them based off their last 3 games?
I think it's a team that if you can hit them in the mouth early, maybe it's a longer game than you would expect against a team that's probably more talented than you. I mean, Ohio State's roster is comparable to any roster nationally in terms of overall top to bottom talent within that 2 deep. I do think Ohio State has an edge in several categories against Notre Dame. However, Notre Dame does play that Michigan-style brand of football where they're going to punch you in the mouth, run the football, and they have a quarterback who can move. I mean, we saw last game, Quinn Ewers probably could have ran for a couple first downs, but he's not all that mobile. Well, Riley Leonard is, and he can take hits too. Jeremiah Love is also a 1,200-yard running back who's now looks like he's back to full strength since that injury against Georgia. So I like Notre Dame to be able to keep this game competitive. I mean, like I said, they play a brand of football that is physical. Ohio State at times, y'all mentioned against Nebraska, Michigan has struggled a little bit to maybe generate explosive plays against a fast and physical front. And R.J. Oben, I mean, right now is playing as well as Jack Sawyer is in this game. So looking forward to a competitive game Monday night. I mean, I am picking Ohio State to win still, but I do like the way that Notre Dame brings a physicality edge to the game.
When you talk about physicality, Tripp and I were talking on the pod earlier this week about like Notre Dame, trying to drag teams into the deep water and play this game on their terms. And we're kind of trying to figure out like, what does that mean for Notre Dame? Like, how do they play this game on their terms if they're going to win? You just mentioned physicality, Brett. Is it as simple as that? Is there something else you think Notre Dame can do in this game to kind of get Ohio State off their game and kind of make it to where this game will be played on Notre Dame's terms?
I think Notre Dame certainly has to stop Ohio State on first down. I mean, you can't let Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins get 5 or 6 yards on first down, because when it's 2nd and 4 and short, well, then you're talking about, some chunk plays Ohio State has at its disposal in the passing game. If you get Will Howard into 2nd and longs and 3rd and long, then you can kind of pin your ears back with that top-ranked Notre Dame defense and really get after that quarterback. Where we've seen Will Howard struggle this season is in 3rd and long situations. And, I mean, that's not akin to any quarterback. They always struggle against blitzes on, 3rd and not so manageable. But Notre Dame has to win first down, in my opinion. And then offensively, they've got to be able to generate, some 10 to 15-yard chunks. Against Penn State, they were able to do that every now and again. They don't have the receiver talent, I think, to kind of go downfield and beat Ohio State the way maybe Texas and then Oregon did earlier in the season. But I do think one way to keep this game competitive and make it a 4-quarter game is Notre Dame winning first down and making sure there are no 75-yard screen passes to Travion Henderson.
I'm not sure that Notre Dame can ever fly under the radar because of what type of program that they are. But ever since they lost to NIU, they've been counted out and they've been kind of underdogs throughout the course of the season. And it seems like they really flourish based on the intangibles that they have. And I think Marcus Freeman obviously deserves a lot of credit for that. How can the intangibles, that chip on their shoulder, being underdogs in this game, how do you measure that for them and what makes them dangerous because of that, where no matter what the talent gap may be, it seems, or players out with injuries, especially for them may be, it seems like they're able to overcome it because of some sort of external factor or internal belief that they have?
Yeah, the good news for Notre Dame is I think all the pressure, I'm talking 100% of it, is in Ohio State in this game. I mean, 9.5-point favorite. You've had 2 of your last 3 playoff wins have been blowouts of quality opponents, whereas Notre Dame has played 2 competitive games the last 2, and then they, blew out Indiana. But Notre Dame, can have that underdog mentality in this game. you also go to a venue in Atlanta that I don't think is going to be so pro-Ohio State. It should be split 50-50, Notre Dame's first shot at a title since 1988. And, you guys mentioned flying under the radar. It's true. I mean, I cover college football in the heart of SEC country, and there were so many SEC programs late in the year, not even looking at Notre Dame as a possible, Final Four type team, but I saw them as that all year because they were blowing out the competition. Since that NIU game, I mean, they dominated some pretty darn good football teams. Georgia Tech, who knocked Miami outside of the playoff those last couple of weeks. They beat then unbeaten Army and Navy, obliterating those two teams. So Notre Dame is a darn good football team and has been for the last 3.5 months. I just think that loss to NIU maybe, clouded some interpretations of what the Fighting Irish were, but that was more an exception to the rule. That was a Saturday where Notre Dame did not play well, whereas the last, 13 games they certainly have. So Marcus Freeman should have a confident group heading into this game. And I think we saw a little bit early against Texas for Ohio State. They were starting to play with a little bit of that pressure, and they were feeling it maybe. And had it not been for that screen pass in the second quarter, man, maybe that game would have gone differently. So Notre Dame's a team that I would probably take the 9.5 points because I do think the Irish are going to keep this one close.
Kind of speaking on that, Brad, it's fascinating because, kind of to your point, fans always look at Notre Dame, right? It's kind of like they roll their eyes because every year you hear the hype about Notre Dame. They win 9 or 10 games, and they get to a big bowl game and get blown out. They don't just lose, they get blown out. Obviously, this year has not been the case, right? They beat Georgia. They just beat Penn State. Here they are, and you think they can be competitive against Ohio State. Have you seen a tangible change? What has led to Notre Dame actually being a legitimate contender this year and not being, for lack of a better term, a paper tiger or a fraud in big games, basically for the last 2 decades or so that they've been in?
Yeah, Riley Leonard is a gritty quarterback, and you have to have some grit at that position to, win these multiple consecutive games against elite teams. Nothing against Sam Hartman, nothing against some other Notre Dame quarterbacks, Ian Book, who have taken this team to the playoff, but they don't have those big wins in their career the way Riley Leonard does. I mean, he did it at Duke last season and then has not missed a beat at Notre Dame. I know he doesn't wow anybody with his arm strength. Notre Dame is not going to get off the bus and look great at the wide receiver position, but Notre Dame just wins, and just wins is all that matters right now in mid-January when you're one of the last 2 teams standing. So I do think the edge at quarterback, Riley Leonard, just being the gritty type that, on 3rd and 3, man, he's going to fall forward and he's going to stick his face in the fan and really, get after it and try to move those chains. And we talked about previously, one way Notre Dame could keep this close, perhaps upset Ohio State. I mean, have these 15 to 17 play long engineered scoring drives. Keep Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, and Emeka Egbuka off the field and try to, make the most of your possessions. That's the game plan, the winning recipe for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame.
The matchup I think I'm most excited for, I think a lot of people are most excited for, is Ohio State's pass offense taking on Notre Dame's pass defense, right? This is strength on strength here.
Yeah.
Notre Dame runs the most man in all of college football. And obviously this receiver core for Ohio State is probably the best in the country. Do you think, is Notre Dame good enough defensively to basically match up man on man to try to slow down this Ohio State passing attack?
You cannot go man on Jeremiah Smith and expect to hold him to, 1 catch for 3 yards. I mean, Texas did so many crazy things defensively to do that. But Marcus Freeman doesn't have the time to completely change his secondary, his pass defense approach. And if I was Marcus Freeman, I wouldn't do it either. I mean, this is one of the best secondaries in college football, has shown so throughout the season. Xavier Watts is an All-American safety. He's going to play well Monday night. But the key for me is, the cornerback play. And if I'm a betting guy, I'm probably betting on Carnell Tate and Emeka Egbuka having big games because Notre Dame's going to try to do everything it can to limit Jeremiah Smith. But we just saw Ohio State, an opposing team, eliminated Jeremiah Smith from the game plan, and Ohio State still scored 28 points, still beat a very good SEC runner-up Texas team. So even if Jeremiah Smith does not have a huge game Monday night in Atlanta, there's enough talent in that wide receiver room at Ohio State to still produce long touchdowns, still produce chain-moving catches on 3rd down. So Notre Dame secondary, as good as it is, man, it has its work cut out for it.
That it does. Al Golden, I'm sure this week plus is going to be very busy trying to figure out how the hell you slow down all these receivers that they have. You mentioned the coaching matchup as well. Marcus Freeman, right? One of the best coaches in all of college football and really now rising up the ranks with how well Notre Dame has played this season. And I think for me, Brad, Ryan Day's been there for a while. And I know he gets a lot of heat, especially from the Ohio State fan base, because he can't beat Michigan. But the guy beats basically everybody else. And even in the playoff games that Ohio State's been in, they've been competitive and come right down the wire against some of the best teams in all of college football. As someone who covers a sport like nationally, how do you view Ryan Day as a head coach?
I think Ryan Day is an elite head coach who just so happens hasn't won a bunch of elite games. But when I saw Ryan Day have a 14-point lead against eventual national champion Georgia inside Mercedes-Benz a couple years ago and then lost that game, that was kind of the turning point for me. Maybe Ryan Day's better than, he's getting credit for. Now, this season's loss to Michigan, man, I can't explain it. You ask any Ohio State insider, they can't explain it either. Ohio State was a 3-touchdown favorite in that game, should have waxed Michigan. I lost money on the Buckeyes for the 4th straight year in that matchup. I can't explain it. And if I'm an Ohio State booster who's given millions of dollars to that university, I'm still probably angry that I have a head coach right now that can't beat Michigan. But all that changes Monday night if he wins the first title since Urban Meyer era in Columbus. And I think you kind of forget about those losses to your arch rival if you're winning big and, collecting rings at the national level. So, Ryan Day, I think he's a top 10 head coach. I might not put him in that top 3 level right now, but if he wins Monday night, he's certainly getting close to, the Kirby Smarts and everybody else in this industry.
I was going to say with that, it feels like for me, when you look at Kirby and look around, Dabo obviously, right, has won a lot, but the Clemson program's kind of back. So, I think, Brad, if he wins, I feel like, to me, he'd be the second best coach in college football. If he does win, let's just say we're sitting here Monday night talking about Ohio State win. Is it fair to call Ryan Day, would you say, the second best coach right now?
I think he probably does ascend to that number 2 spot. Kalen DeBoer took a step back at Bama this season. Brian Kelly has no rings, and he left Notre Dame to try to get one at LSU. Has not, I guess, exceeded expectations yet there. And you look at some of the other teams inside the top 10. I mean, you said it, man. Dabo Swinney has 2 rings in the last decade, but the last couple of seasons, Clemson has not been a team that scares you when you see them on the schedule. I mean, South Carolina beat Clemson, Georgia beat Clemson by 31 points. Sure. And then Clemson lost to a third SEC team in Texas by a couple touchdowns too. So, I would probably have Ryan Day number 2 in coaching, but still, I mean, to lose head-to-head to what I think is Michigan's worst team the last 5 years, it's still a head-scratcher to me.
It's so interesting, and we were talking about your way too early rankings for 2025, and because of the reasons you just mentioned, I think in a vacuum, right, Ohio State clearly has more pressure. All the odds are in their favor for this game, and they kind of need it because of the hiccups they've had throughout the course of the season with all that money. But Ryan and I were kind of talking about this the other day on the podcast. You feel like because of Ohio State, who they are, the resources, it's not unfathomable to see in 2025, 2026, 2027, that Ohio State's right back there with another opportunity to win. We like the direction Marcus Freeman has Notre Dame going. We think they're a great program. You have them in your top 5 for next year already too. But to see Notre Dame on this stage, you don't feel like they'll be there as frequently, maybe as Ohio. So what pressure is there on Notre Dame in this to make the most of the opportunity? Because in our opinion, you might not see them on this stage as frequently as in Ohio State. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
No, I think it is, man. When we first heard of this 12-team playoff expansion, 3 to 4 years ago, that it was coming down in 2024, I thought Notre Dame and Penn State specifically were 2 programs who were going to benefit the most from expansion. You've got Penn State always finishes 10-2 with 2 big losses, couldn't make that Final Four, but would get in the 12-team. We saw it happen. And then Notre Dame being an independent that essentially plays a ACC schedule. Well, Notre Dame's more talented than 11 of 12 teams on that schedule every year. So you go 10-2, 11-1 Notre Dame, you're going to make the playoff. Now, what I did not envision was Notre Dame winning, 3 consecutive games basically against elite teams to do this. And Marcus Freeman has done it. Now, I think Marcus Freeman, if he's the coach in South Bend for the next 10 years, I think he does get back to this game outside of Monday night and have a chance to win it. But as you mentioned, this is Notre Dame's best chance to win a national championship. I mean, in the last 2 decades, we saw the team in 2013 get blown out with Manny Te'o against Alabama, the Ian Book team that also lost to Clemson. I didn't think was all that elite compared to this one right now. So Notre Dame's a team that, the window is right here to win that championship. But if they do not win Monday night in Atlanta, I'm not selling my stock on the Irish and Marcus Freeman just yet. I think he's a top 5 coach now. He's proven that. And, I mean, to win, 13 straight games in pretty convincing fashion since a bad loss, that speaks volumes to the buy-in that he has at that program.
You mentioned the other team right there, Penn State, kind of transitioning away from this game. Look, a lot has changed probably in the last 24 to 48 hours with them, with all the players announcing that they're going to return. And that's been the model for Michigan in 2023, Ohio State and Notre Dame this year in 2024 is roster retention. Where are they right now in the landscape of the Big Ten in college football, not only going into 2025, but moving forward with the breakthrough year that they had this year? Ultimately, like we could very easily be having the same conversation about them right now that we're having about Notre Dame in what was a back and forth Orange Bowl game.
Yeah, you get Drew Aller back at quarterback. You get both of your 1,000-yard rushers, former 5-star guys, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Abdul Carter's gone, and he's a hard replacement, man. He's one of the best pass rushers in college football. But I do think the window is still open for James Franklin to win a title at Penn State. We mentioned in the open, if it does not happen in 2025, maybe, he start losing some steam there because Penn State right now does not have the NIL resources that a lot of teams just ahead of them in this preseason top 25 do. I mean, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon specifically, those 3 teams right now and Tennessee are all, lapping the competition in terms of booster support, NIL, and resources. James Franklin has kind of pounded the table several times this season included that, Penn State supporters need to give more if you want to retain guys and go after big-time recruits. So it's all about the Jimmies and Joes, man. I mean, if you have a great 2 deep, you're going to have a shot. But Penn State, like I said, a year ago to several, the 12-team playoff was going to help teams like Notre Dame and Penn State, and we've already seen that come to fruition here in year 1.
And then finally from me, Brad, we talked a lot on the pod earlier this week about your top 25 list for 2025, and it had 7 Big Ten teams on there. Tripp and I were kind of talking about how this feels like going to next season already, looking ahead, like the deepest maybe the Big Ten's been in a very long time because they've had the top tier talent in this past season, right? You had Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana make the playoff. But then after the top 4 kind of felt like, there's some teams okay in the middle that never really felt like elite or maybe at the level of other conferences like the SEC. Having 7 teams in the Big Ten or in the top 25, I should say, from the Big Ten, even we talked about a few other teams, Washington, USC. It feels like, Brad, the Big Ten next year is going to be chaotic. There's going to be a lot of parity. I don't think we'll see an undefeated team the way Oregon kind of did just because of how tough it is. When you look at the Big Ten early next year, does it kind of feel like the deepest it's been in a while?
I think the Big Ten has surpassed the SEC in terms of, how many titles both these leagues are going to win over the next 10 years. We haven't even mentioned Wisconsin and Iowa. I mean, those are 2 respected programs that I don't have as preseason top 25s, but against other Power 4 conferences, have played pretty well over the year. If Wisconsin plays Bama next year, has a chance to beat Kalen DeBoer early. Iowa's a team that lost to Missouri during bowl season, but always has an elite defense. Nebraska's a team that I think has to take that next step over the next couple of years to, strengthen the Big Ten from top to bottom. Dylan Raiola, the Huskers did a great job holding on to him. Several teams were expecting him to portal after his freshman year. It did not happen. So Nebraska kind of ponied up and got him. Matt Rule's the right hire there. And then if Michigan kind of bounce back from this 8-5 finish under Sharon Moore and get back to that elite, 9-10 win level, then the Big Ten certainly is well on its way. But Wisconsin's a team, though, that I'm looking at next year where Luke Fickell, I thought 3 years into his tenure there, he would have the Badgers further than he has right now. He's a guy that, he has to go 8-4 or better next season or they're going to want somebody else in Madison.
No, you're right. You're right. Brad, this has been awesome. Really do appreciate the time, and your insight's been tremendous. Enjoy the game on Monday. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, fellas.
That's a great guest that you found. I know you have a relationship working with Brad on some of your other shows in the past. How many shows are you on?
Too many. Just two. Produce JR Sport Brief. I'm here with, well, I guess I host Hick at Night on Sunday nights, and I'm here with you and Still Enrolled. So three.
The most fascinating, and look, I think you had a great breakdown of the game, and we can react to that. But to hear someone outside of this podcast, because we've been beating the drum of the Big Ten, and I think in that last question, I don't love, and this isn't a shot at you, but like to me, Illinois, you can say not at the level of an SEC in the deep. What's different about what Illinois did this year than South Carolina, Ole Miss? Like, I think that's I think it's a preconceived. If you look at the bowl games for Michigan to beat Alabama, the record, the Big Ten, 5-1 against the SEC in the bowl games. And I don't want to put too much stock in a single bowl game where you have opt-outs and portal and, draft and all that. That aside, to hear Brad talk about the Big Ten jumping the SEC in terms of prestige, how he expects them to succeed in the future, to hear it from someone who clearly, just listen to Brad. He's a Southern guy. He covers Southeastern Conference football in the ACC in the South. To hear him make that statement, that speaks volumes about where the Big Ten is going into next season.
And two, again, when we talked about this on Tuesday's pod, we didn't even mention Wisconsin. And I think they do have a big year 3 here under Luke Fickell to come. And I think there are expectations, but that's a respected coach who's won before, who's gotten a team to a college football playoff berth before. And you look at this conference, like, I was not trying to be I like a lot what Brett Bielema has done. So maybe I'll phrase it this way. You never looked at Illinois as a college football playoff contender in 2024. I think that changes in 2025.
But I didn't look at South Carolina as a college football
playoff
contender.
I agree.
I didn't look at Kentucky as a college football. I didn't look at Vandy as a contender. And Illinois had better season than those teams.
No, you're right. I'm not trying to diminish, and it's bad wording by me. I'll put my hand up here and say I screwed up. But when you look at I do feel like now looking ahead to 2025, like we talked about Penn State earlier this week, right? About the starters that have coming back and the expectations. When you have 18 starters come back for Illinois, and a lot of them played high level football, and like I said, they go 10-3, capped off by a good win over South Carolina. By the way, a team that played most of their starters as well. Like, I don't think it's crazy to sit here and say, like, Illinois should be in the conversation to make the playoff, right? Like, I think, and we could be talking about, 6 teams? No, I don't think all 6 will make it, but we could realistically 6 or 7 teams in the conversation, in the mix for a college football playoff berth. You have teams, like, it's going to be a gauntlet. This season is going to be very tough. And just to reiterate what we said before earlier this week, I don't see any team getting through this season unscathed. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. I think all of them are getting got, maybe by each other, but at least one loss here just because of how tough it's going to be each and every week.
And this is too deep into the weeds, but Illinois' 2025 schedule, I think we touched on it once before.
Oh, look at you.
They
looking
don't
ahead. Are you projecting? No, not Brian Tripp.
They don't play Penn State. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Michigan. And they play USC and Ohio State at home.
We talk about schedule disparity a lot, right? That's a schedule disparity that sets up in Illinois' favor. If you can win one, like you said, of those 2 big games, that might be enough for a resume to get you at least in the conversation.
You got to go on the road to Bloomington early. Like,
tough.
Yeah, whoever wins that game might be that team who outside of Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, who actually is one of those contenders for a playoff in the Big Ten.
Just like Illinois, Nebraska earlier this year, right? Remember that early Friday night game we talked about both teams kind of who can win, be the contender. Illinois won, and they were the team that kind of rocketed up to a 9-3 season. I'm with you a lot.
But it's mid-January, and who's to say, don't wish this on anyone.
There he is.
Star quarterback, star running back, star defensive end, star wide receiver, torn ACL out for the season. Or so much can happen. So much. I hate the discussion. I hate the conversation, but I get it.
Brian Tripp is back, folks. There he is.
Let's give our picks for the national championship, okay? We kind of, I think, hinted at it, but
let's do it. Tripp, you want to go first here? Ohio State, 8.5 point favorites. Now it's come down a point. It started off at 9.5, so maybe some bettors feeling good about the Irish here in that number. Brad, we heard just him say he's picking Ohio State to win, but thinks Notre Dame can keep it close here, make it a competitive game. Your official prediction for the national championship game, Brian Tripp, is?
Ohio State's up 14-10 at the half. Ohio State wins it 31-10. They blow them out in the second half. I like Ohio State big.
Wow. I think it's a little bit more of I think it's kind of like a Texas game in the sense of I think it's a little bit on the lower scoring side. I don't think Ohio State offensively has success the way they did against Oregon and against Tennessee. But I think it's like controlled where even though Texas for a large part was down by a touchdown, it never felt like until the end of, oh, wow, Ohio State could lose this game until you're sitting there at the 1 yard line and goes, oh, man, Texas is 1 yard away from tying this game. And then obviously Ohio State makes a play to win it. I feel like Ohio State will be in control this whole game, but the score will never be a blowout. I like Ohio State 27-13. I think they win the game. I think they cover the spread here. I think, again, they have a firm grasp on this game, and they win their second national title in a decade here. Ryan Day hoists the trophy. And I'm with Brad. I think we're talking about Ryan Day as the second best head coach in college football, behind only Kirby Smart after Monday night.
When's your flight?
So I will be in Tampa Bay this weekend for a wedding for a friend. So I will be flying into Atlanta from Tampa on Sunday morning before the NFL games start. Like I say, I'm hosting my show, Hick at Night, on Sunday night from Atlanta. So I got to be ready for that. So I'll be in Atlanta Sunday afternoon, early afternoon, and then leaving early Tuesday morning.
Will there be a live audience for Hick at Night on Sunday? Like where are you hosting it from?
We do have for Odyssey a sister station, 92.9 The Game. Shout out to them that I'll be broadcasting from. So it is a radio station. We're not doing, a live from center of Atlanta.
Hold on, though. This is kind of a big deal. A national talent like you dropping into one of your local sister stations. This is a big deal.
They're going to roll out the red carpet for me at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. Yeah, I'm sure. I just hope the door's unlocked.
Where are you staying? I would have loved for Penn State to be in the national championship, for both of us to be there, to do our show live from there, to get to see and experience no matter how the game went. Where are you staying in Atlanta?
So, because of what you just said, of the possibility of Penn State making it, my friends and I were going to go. So I waited getting a place just because if they were going to go, I was going to go stay with them.
Yep.
So once Penn State was eliminated, I didn't have many options, and I figured, okay, I'm working. My show is late. The radio show ends at 2 a.m. on Monday morning. Whew. And then the games obviously are going to end late on Monday night, early Tuesday morning. So I figured, okay, I'd rather pay more and stay close versus staying further away for cheaper, just because who knows what the Uber situation is going to be, especially on Monday night. Could be a complete mess. I don't want to get stranded. So I'm staying at the Media Hotel.
Which is?
The Westin. So if anyone is down in Atlanta and wants to come visit, if you're watching on YouTube, you know what I look like. I'll be out and about in Atlanta all day on Monday, maybe exploring the city, get into the stadium early. Give us a shout out. Give Still Enrolled a shout out here. I'll be walking around the city. I don't really know what to do. I've never been to Atlanta. I don't know if you have. So outside of getting to the stadium early, walking around, checking out, the $2 popcorn that Arthur Blank has, and probably going to Chick-fil-A that's open like once a year in the stadium. I don't know what else I'm going to do.
Yeah, so that Westin, that was the Media Hotel last year for the Peach Bowl. I'm looking at it right now on Google Maps. We stayed at the Marriott. We stayed at the Marriott Marquis with Penn State.
Okay.
They're up the street from the Westin. It was the only place open on Christmas night. There's a Waffle House you could go to. It's right near Centennial Olympic Park. The stadium's cool. Like, really cool. Mercedes-Benz is beautiful. Atlanta and downtown Atlanta sucks.
So I've heard that that it's, and that's part of
I would, and I don't mean in like a joking light. Be careful leaving the hotel after dark.
Well, in theory, I'm not roaming the streets of Atlanta at 3 a.m. The plan is to take an Uber right from the radio station to the hotel. I'm going to get dropped off right in front.
I know.
And that's it. I'm not someone that I don't live. I'm a boring man, Tripp. I'll be honest with you. I don't live dangerously. I don't take many risks.
This
I
isn't
will
no.
not
This
be
isn't.
gallivanting.
This isn't a warning. Honestly, anyone going, be careful leaving the hotel in downtown Atlanta after dark.
Ohio State fans, if you are celebrating after a win, probably inebriated, keep that in the back of your mind. Have Tripp's voice. Be careful. Be safe. Just echoing through if you're leaving the bars late at night. I guess win or lose for Ohio State if you end up going to the game on Monday. Be safe. Also give us a shout out as well. But like Tripp said, well, sort of, because I'll be there for the game, but just also in general, because it's a big game, we will be live on YouTube. So if you want instant reaction, immediate reaction to Ohio State winning or losing, check us out on YouTube. Still Enrolled is where you can check us out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Minutes after the game ends, we will be there, locked and loaded.
And then you're going to post that on Spotify, right? And
that's right.
And Apple,
so if you can't bear to look at our ugly mugs, which I don't blame you, and you want to wait a little bit, if you don't want to stay up that late, because I know it's going to be a late game, and you want to listen the next morning on our podcast feed, wherever you do get your podcasts, Still Enrolled, check us out. The live show will be there for your audio enjoyment. That would be Tuesday morning as well. We got you covered here on Still Enrolled. Thank you, as always, for joining us on this, what has been a very fun first season of Still Enrolled. Should be a good way to cap it off on Monday night. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you Monday night after the game right here on the Still Enrolled podcast.